get to see someone that killed my son. You killed them. You killed them all and hurt all of them. You, a domino. You, the mastermind of all. You called. If you wouldn't have called, it wouldn't have happened. This ain't no joke, man. This ain't no... You're gonna burn. They're gonna tear your ass up. Inside out. And I pray every day to your God and all the other gods that you, your family, and your feces throw up. You must. There's no favor.
I'm gonna have to object to this.
I pray for this. You must, man.
This is the El Mula Banquet Hall in Hialeah, Florida, where on May 30th, 2021, a Memorial Day weekend celebration turned into one of Miami-Dade County's deadliest mass shootings. 3 people were killed and more than 20 others were wounded when masked gunmen opened fire on a crowd enjoying a hip-hop concert and album release party. Before we understand how this tragedy unfolded and why 4 men now face the death penalty for their alleged roles in this massacre, we need to go back to where it all began, to the gang territories of South Florida, where a deadly rivalry between 2 street crews had been escalating for years. The story of the El Mula shooting starts in the impoverished neighborhoods of Miami-Dade County, specifically in Opa-locka, an area so plagued by violence that locals call it Baghdad West. Here, in apartment complexes scarred by poverty and drug trafficking, 2 rival gangs emerged: the Bricks, based in an Opa-locka housing complex known simply as the Bricks, and the Back Blues, operating out of the Alexandria Garden Apartments in North Miami-Dade. These weren't sophisticated criminal enterprises. They were neighborhood crews, born from economic desperation in areas where more than 40% of children live in poverty, fighting over drug territories and street respect. The rivalry between these 2 groups stretched back years, rooted in competition over narcotics distribution and territorial control. The Back Blues had a particularly notorious history. In October 2006, gang members ambushed police officers who were raiding a vacant apartment for drugs and weapons, shooting Detective Raymond Robertson 7 times. The gang's operations were so entrenched that they eventually corrupted law enforcement itself. In November 2011, Opa-locka police captain Arthur Balam was sentenced to 87 months in federal prison for his involvement with the Back Blues gang, including protecting their drug operations, participating in trafficking, and even helping plan an armored truck robbery that resulted in a security guard's murder. The Bricks gang operated similarly, controlling their territory through violence and drug sales. What made this rivalry particularly dangerous was how personal it became. At the center of the feud were 2 key figures: Alan Gregory Chambers Jr., known on the streets as Young Savage, a senior member of the Bricks gang, and Antonio Jones, a rapper who performed under the name Fopak, affiliated with the Back Blues crew. These 2 men weren't just rivals, they were locked in a personal battle over who would be the king of Opa-locka, trading threats on social media and through their music, each claiming dominance over the neighborhood. The violence between these groups followed a predictable pattern. An attack would provoke retaliation, which would spark another attack, creating an endless cycle of bloodshed. Gang members kept score, remembered every slight, loss, and disrespect, and in May 2021, that cycle reached a breaking point. On May 23rd, just 1 week before the El Mula shooting, a 19-year-old named Antoine Streeter was shot and killed in Opa-locka. Streeter was associated with the Bricks gang, and his death was so awful that the gangs knew that someone had to pay, someone had to answer for this loss. According to testimony that would later emerge in court, Bricks gang members, including Chambers, made the decision to retaliate against their rivals. They knew exactly where to find them. Fopak was scheduled to perform at the El Mula Banquet Hall on Memorial Day weekend, an album release party that would draw members of the Back Blues and their associates. This wasn't going to be a targeted hit on a quiet street corner. It was going to be a public execution, a message sent in the most brutal way possible. The planning began when the gang members stole a white Nissan Pathfinder to use in the attack. They gathered weapons, including AR-15 rifles, high-powered firearms capable of unleashing devastating damage in seconds, and they assigned roles. And according to later confessions and court documents, a young man named Devontae Barnes was designated as the lookout. His job was simple but crucial: scout the location, load GPS coordinates into the shooters' phones, and make sure they could find their targets. Barnes would later admit to investigators that he met with the other participants before the shooting, that he knew weapons were being prepared, and that he understood what was about to happen. But he insisted the plan was supposed to be different. The original intent, according to Barnes, was to follow their targets home and carry out the attack in a more secluded location. What actually happened that night would prove far more chaotic and indiscriminate. On May 30th, 2021, Memorial Day weekend in Miami, Florida, the El Mula Banquet Hall, located at 7639 Northwest 186th Street in Hialeah, Florida, was packed with people celebrating at a hip-hop concert and album release party. Around 12:30 in the morning, two vehicles pulled up to the venue: the stolen white Nissan Pathfinder and a black Cadillac sedan. Three men emerged from the vehicles, their faces concealed behind ski masks and bodies draped in dark hoodies. What happened next lasted only 10 to 15 seconds, but those seconds would forever change dozens of lives. The gunman opened fire on the crowd gathered outside the banquet hall, unleashing a torrent of bullets from multiple weapons. People screamed, dove for cover, ran in every direction trying to escape the hail of gunfire. When it was over, when the shooters had climbed back into their vehicles and sped away into the night, the parking lot was littered with 99 spent shell castings from 9 different firearms.
I don't know the address.
Okay.
I'm laying here dying.
Okay, stay on the line with me. Take slowly breaths and try to relax. I'm gonna get you some help.
Emergency calls flooded into 911 as victims and witnesses frantically begged for help. The scene was carnage as bodies lay on the ground. Blood pooled on the pavement as survivors clutched their wounds, unsure if they would live to see another day. 2 people were pronounced dead at the scene. 26-year-old Desmond Eugene Owens, a father of 2 young children, had been targeted because of his associations with the Back Blues group. He died instantly, never making it to the hospital. 26-year-old Clayton Ladarius Dillard III, also a father, was killed alongside him, another victim of the gang rivalry that had nothing to do with his personal choices that night. But the death toll wouldn't stop at 2. 32-year-old Shaniqua Lachelle Peterson, a mother of a 12-year-old son, was shot in the head during the attack. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, a bullet lodged behind her ear, her brain fighting to survive the trauma. For 4 agonizing days, Peterson's family held vigil at her bedside, praying for a miracle that would never come. On June 3, 2021, Shaniqua Peterson succumbed to her injuries, becoming the 3rd fatality of the El Mula massacre. What made Peterson's death particularly tragic was that she had no gang affiliations whatsoever. She wasn't involved in the feud between the Bricks and the Back Blues, but was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire of someone else's war. Her family and friends remembered her as outgoing and full of life, an amazing mother who always had others' backs, someone whose smile could light up any room. But Peterson wasn't the only unintended victim, because more than 20 other people were wounded in the attack, their injuries ranging from minor to catastrophic. Some were shot in the legs or arms, while others suffered wounds to their torsos, their backs, their heads. One survivor later testified in court that she was shot 3 times in her back, believing in those terrifying moments that she was going to die and never see her family again. Among the wounded were the intended targets. Antonio Jones, the rapper whose performance had drawn the Bricks gang to the venue, was shot in the foot. The injury was minor compared to others, and he survived. John Trell Love, who performed under the name JRG Hatchet, another rapper affiliated with the Back Blues crew, was shot in the head, but somehow survived his injuries, though the long-term effects of his wound remain largely unknown to the public. The randomness of who lived and who died, who suffered minor injuries versus life-altering trauma, only amplified the horror of what had happened. Melanie Bruton, the mother of Desmond Owens, spoke to reporters in the days following her son's death, her grief palpable, her words raw with the kind of pain that no parent should ever have to endure.
I just feel that no parent should have to bury a child. And that's it. No parent should have to bury a child. It don't go that way.
Desmond was unarmed that night, simply attending an event with friends, and now his 2 young children would grow up without their father.
Family is truly heartbroken by this senseless, unnecessary, demonic violence that's going on.
Owens's aunt, Shekinah Bruton, didn't mince words when she addressed the community, but she also made a plea that went beyond grief, a call for the community to break the code of silence that so often protects killers in gang violence.
Violence needs to stop. I need everyone, listen, I know the streets. And the street says, snitches get stitches. But guess what? If you don't snitch, there will be no conviction. No snitching, no conviction.
This was the reality facing investigators. Hundreds of people had been at the party that night, and many of them had witnessed the attack or captured it on their phones. But in neighborhoods governed by gang influence, cooperation with police often comes at a steep price. The no snitching code isn't just a cultural phenomenon, it's a survival mechanism, a way to avoid becoming the next target. Owens's cousin and family attorney Ashley Gant appealed directly to witnesses, urging them to share any information, any video, any detail that could help bring the shooters to justice. Perhaps no moment captured the anguish of the families more than when Clayton Dillard's father, Rico Clayton Dillard, interrupted a police press conference the day after the shooting, his voice breaking with rage and sorrow as he confronted the invisible killers who had taken his son's life.
You all killed my kid. You must burn. You're gonna burn. You hear me? You killed a good kid for no reason.
And that's the pain that you seek.
Clayton Dillard was remembered by those who knew him as loving, caring, laid back, and someone with a beautiful heart. He had attended Dr. Michael Kropp Senior High School and Highland Oaks Middle School, growing up in the same Miami neighborhoods that would eventually claim his life. His father would not let his memory fade.
Here! He laid right here, like this, and no one helped him!
In May 2025, on the 4th anniversary of the shooting, Rico Dillard returned to the site of the El Mula banquet hall, which had since been converted into a supermarket. He stood there holding photos of his son inscribed with the words, "Sleep in Heaven," a father's tribute to a life cut short. But Rico Dillard did more than mourn. He issued a challenge to other fathers, a call for them to step up and be positive role models for their children, to break the cycle of violence that had claimed so many young lives in Miami. I would love to see all the fathers, and if you taking care and providing and you love your kids and you don't want to go through what I went through, you must stand and come out somewhere and show your face. Your kids are watching you. They learn from your behavior. While families grieved and the community reeled, Miami-Dade police launched an intensive investigation, knowing they were dealing with a case that had rattled not just the local area, but the entire state. Police Director Freddie Ramirez labeled the attack a targeted and cowardly act, making it clear that investigators believed this was gang-related violence, not a random shooting. Governor Ron DeSantis offered condolences and pledged swift justice, though critics like State Senator Chevron Jones pointed out that thoughts and prayers weren't enough, that real change required bipartisan discussions about gun control. Rewards for information quickly climbed to $125,000, with contributions from businessman Marcus Lemonis and the ATF. The pressure was on law enforcement to solve this case, to show that mass shootings would not go unpunished, that gang violence would not be tolerated. The investigation relied heavily on surveillance footage, cell phone records, GPS data, and witness testimonies. Detectives worked to piece together the movements of the suspects before, during, and after the attack, tracking digital footprints that the shooters had left behind in their planning and execution of the crime. The first arrest came in September 2021 when 22-year-old Devontae Barnes was taken into custody. Barnes, a Miami Gardens resident, quickly became a focal point of the investigation when he confessed to acting as the lookout for the shooters. His role, while not involving pulling a trigger, was crucial to the attack's success.
Whose side was T-Man on?
The bricks.
Did the problem between the Back Blues and the bricks go back years before the El Mula mass shooting happened?
Yes.
During his interrogation, Barnes detailed the planning that went into the attack, explaining the long-standing feud between the Bricks and the Back Blues, confirming that the shooting of Antoine Streeter a week earlier had been the catalyst for the retaliation. He admitted to meeting with other gang members, to loading GPS coordinates into their phones, and to knowing that weapons were being prepared. But he also insisted that the original plan was to follow their targets to a more secluded location, not to open fire at a crowded venue. That distinction would mean little in the courtroom. In September 2023, Barnes stood trial on 3 counts of first-degree murder and 21 counts of first-degree attempted murder. The prosecution's case was devastating. Jurors watched Barnes' own confession video, hearing in his own words how he had facilitated the attack. They heard from survivors who described the terror of that night, the chaos of people scrambling for safety, the horror of realizing they had been shot. They even heard evidence about a rap song that Barnes' alleged associates had later made, featuring Barnes in the music video with lyrics that appeared to boast about the El Mula massacre, murder gang bust his brain and pull off in a splat, a reference to the stolen car used in the attack and the victims who had been shot in the head. The defense tried to argue that Barnes didn't fully understand what was happening, that he was guilty by association rather than by intent, but the jury didn't buy it. They convicted Barnes on 3 counts of second-degree murder and 20 counts of second-degree attempted murder. The distinction between first and second degree was significant, reflecting the jury's assessment of his culpability as a facilitator rather than a shooter, but the consequences were still severe. On November 3, 2023, Judge Marissa Tinkler-Mendez sentenced Devontae Barnes to 23 concurrent life sentences without the possibility of parole. In her remarks, the judge made it clear that Barnes's role as lookout didn't diminish his responsibility for the deaths and injuries that occurred. "It's as if, Mr. Barnes, you had pulled the trigger," she said, acknowledging that the attack wouldn't have happened without his assistance. Before sentencing, victims' families addressed the court, including Rico Dillard, who made the decision not to seek the death penalty for his son's killer. His reasoning was chilling in its own way. "You need to sit and suffer every day," he told Barnes, believing life in prison would be a harsher punishment than execution. But the case was far from over. Barnes was just one piece of a larger puzzle, and investigators were still hunting for the actual shooters. There had been another early arrest, a man named Warnerick Buckner, who had initially confessed to being one of the gunmen. But in December 2021, prosecutors were forced to drop all charges against Buckner due to a critical procedural error. He had been interrogated after requesting an attorney, a clear violation of his Miranda rights. The confession was thrown out and Buckner walked free on the El Mula charges, though he would later face separate charges for the killing of a 6-year-old in an unrelated shooting. The breakthrough came in June 2024, nearly 3 years after the shooting. Following extensive raids in Miami Gardens and Opa-locka, police arrested 4 men they believed were the actual shooters and drivers: 30-year-old Alan Gregory Chambers Jr., 27-year-old Willie Zavon Hill, 31-year-old Jacare Brian Green, and 22-year-old Eugene Anthony Holmes. All 4 were alleged members of the Bricks gang. The evidence against them was substantial. Investigators had used cell phone records, GPS tracking data, surveillance footage, and DNA evidence to link each suspect to specific roles in the attack. Holmes was accused of driving the stolen white Nissan Pathfinder. Green allegedly drove the black Cadillac. Chambers and Hill were identified as 2 of the gunmen who had emerged from the Cadillac and opened fire on the crowd. Hill faced an additional charge of evidence tampering for disposing of the Pathfinder in a canal after the shooting. Each of the 4 suspects was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 20 counts of first-degree attempted murder with a deadly weapon, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. These were capital offenses, and in July 2024, Miami-Dade State Attorney Kathleen Fernandez-Rundle announced that prosecutors would be seeking the death penalty for all 4 defendants. In her announcement, Fernandez-Rundle emphasized the premeditated and heinous nature of the crime, the fact that innocent people had been killed alongside the intended targets, and the massive impact the shooting had on the Miami-Dade community. The death penalty pursuit signals the state's determination to hold the shooters fully accountable, to send a message that gang violence resulting in mass casualties will face the harshest possible consequences. All 4 defendants have pleaded not guilty. Court appearances were scheduled for September 2024, with proceedings continuing into 2025. In May 2025, Willie Zavon Hill, who had been in federal custody for a prior firearm possession conviction, was transferred to Miami-Dade jurisdiction and appeared in bond court. But as of today, no trials have reached verdicts, and no additional arrests have been announced, though prosecutors have indicated the investigation remains active with the possibility of more charges. The question that haunts this case is the same one that haunts so many instances of gang violence. Could it have been stopped? The feud between the Bricks and the Back Blues stretched back years. Law enforcement knew about these groups, had prosecuted members before, had even exposed police corruption tied to the Back Blues in 2011. Antoine Streeter's killing a week before the El Mula shooting should have been a red flag that retaliation was coming. But in neighborhoods where violence is a constant presence, where shootings are so common that Opa-locka earned the nickname Baghdad West, one more killing doesn't always trigger the kind of preventative response that might save lives. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.